Hey guys, this is Locke. In this video, I'm going to go over my guide on Alexei. I think he's a really interesting character. I think he can be built very powerfully. I don't even think he's a tank really. He works so much better as a bruiser. I think that's how you can build him, but you can also build him as a tank. He does have the guard skill if you really want to go that way, but I think he's way more effective as a high damage dealing bruiser. So let's get right into it. His main thing is actually his trait, which is here it's called passive, but this is his trait. So what this trait does is that he has. Shall go to the third one because for some reason the first one isn't. The first star is not correct. But so what his trait does is that he has something called unlimited resolve. Now resolve is when your character gets defeated, he doesn't die. He has 5% HP and he's not able to die until you kill him again. Unlimited resolve means that he doesn't die until at least the start of the next turn. So this means no matter how many times enemies attack him, for that one turn, he will not die. He will just take everything and not die. So with that in mind, it opens up a lot of really interesting plays around him. And by the way, you can't even remove the resolve. As it says, he's immune to minus resolve. So you have to let his resolve play out. So that's his main thing. So his whole gimmick is built around this idea. And looking at his skills, I think he's a really interesting character. I think a lot of people will have a lot of fun with him if you decide to get him, build him, and play with him. So one of the main things, if you are serious about him, I very highly recommend you at least get him to the third star. Because if you look at it, if you look at the first and second star, he doesn't have the toughness. And toughness is actually, in my opinion, pretty important to, well, the way that I've thought about how you can play him. So what toughness does is toughness makes it so that whenever your unit takes damage, right, whenever your health dips below 70%, they're in an injured state. And then when it dips below 30%, they're in a dying state. So with those things, with injured and dying states, you do so much less damage, and you are also taking a lot more damage as well. So it's easier to kill you, and you don't even do as much damage. So that's a pretty significant debuff, and that's built into everyone. With toughness, he's able to get rid of that. He doesn't have that debuff anymore, so he could be dying, and he would still be doing 100% of his normal damage. So the way that I would build him. And so basically, my idea is to basically keep him, work him around the resolve, like his unlimited resolve. So when he's almost dying, when he's like at 10% HP, 5% HP, whatever, he is able to do a lot of damage because he's in the dying state, but he's not suffering from any kind of debuffs, right? So that getting the toughness is pretty important to him. So I would highly recommend, if you are planning on playing him, to at least get him to the third star. After that, I mean, yeah, at the fifth star, he becomes even more powerful because one of the main things at the fifth star is that the unlimited resolve starts for 2 turns instead of one. So you have 2 turns to wreak whatever havoc you want, and you will not die, which is basically double the effect, right? Double the trait effect. And it says his trait attribute, so basically his attack. So his trait gives him 20% attack, so that becomes a 40% attack when the unlimited resolve is triggered. So yeah, I mean he can do really well at the 5 star as well. But as I said, I would seriously recommend you at least get into third star. Um, okay, so I think the best way to talk about him, in my opinion, is to go with the 3 skills. My build and the 3 skills that I'm gonna lay out for you, and then I'll talk about some other things that you can do with them. So the first thing I want to talk about is called Gore Drinker, which is a skill that you would unlock at the 7th rank. Um, Whenever he's attacked, he gains Gore Drinker for 2 turns, and it can stack up to 3 times. What it does is it increases his damage by 20% each, and his lifesteal by 20% as well. So this means that if you're hit 3 different times, you're basically increasing your damage by 60% and your lifesteal by 60% for 3 turns. I think no matter what you do, you have to get Gore Drinker because I feel like that's one of the key things around him. pair that with his unlimited resolve, like enemies will be piling on him. He will not die, but his damage, his damage boost will be there. He will have a huge damage potential now with plus 60% damage, and he will also have 60% lifesteal. So although he's almost dead, he will basically regain all his health back, right? So Gore Drinker, in my opinion, is the very first thing that I think you should go with. Um, okay, so alongside Gore Drinker, you can bring two more skills. I want to suggest something to you. Um, get this counter, right? So this is basically the brute bear counter. It's better than the normal counter because it can be activated 2 times per round. Okay, just keep that in mind. And then look at this one, which this skill, what it does is it makes his strike back range increased from 1 range to 3, so he will be able to attack things like even ranged attacks that he takes. He will be able to strike back. It increases his strike back damage, and it increases his strike back count. So now he'll be able to strike back 3 times instead of 2. Okay, so with this strike back, with this increased strike back effect, it's a support skill that increases the effect of his strike back, and with this skill, his innate skill, which is an AoE that does 90% damage. Um, so put all of this together with his Gore Drinker. So imagine, right? So he goes into the middle of the field. Maybe he does a little bit of damage, or whatever. He stands in the middle. All the enemies are piling onto him. He's by himself, so everyone is piling onto him, trying to damage him. And every time they hit him, he will do an increased strike back, right? So you go in the middle of these enemies and you use this skill, so that when enemies are attacking him, they will be taking increased damage from his increased strike back skill. So they will have, their health will already be lower because of this strike back skill, which also is, by the way, um, working with his Gore Drinker. So every time he strikes back, he also gets some health back. Then when it's your turn, right? Like, so once all the enemies have finished trying to attack you, and then now it's your turn, you land in the middle of them. You go wherever you can get as many people in this AoE as possible, and use this AoE, which does 90% damage, right, to everybody within 2 squares. And if you're able to kill any enemies with this, your trait effect, its cooldown is reduced by 1. So to remind you, this unlimited resolve skill, it can trigger once every 7 rounds. So if you happen to kill 3 enemies, so now you only have to wait 4 more rounds to trigger this. I feel like this way to play him is really powerful, and I think it'll be really interesting. And you know, I think that would be like I said, like a bruiser kind of way to play him. He will take damage, he will not die, and instead he can deal back a lot more damage than he gets. And whatever is left, if they didn't die, that's okay. You can clean them. We can clean it up with this innate skill. Um, Now, you also need to pick out, to just finish this build, you also need to pick out a regular, like a normal attack. And I would recommend this one because this one deals 110 damage, so it'll be 20% more damage than, this supporting skill. All right, so it also, whenever you defeat anybody with this, you also gain 1 energy back. To use this skill, you need 3 energy. To use your supporting skill, you need 2, and that's it. I mean, for Gore Drinker, it's a passive, so you need 3 for this one, and you need 2 for this one. And every time you defeat an enemy with your normal attack, you get 1 energy back. So that's my that's the build that I would go if I had him. If I already have a couple of tanks, so I don't need to get another one. That's the reason why I didn't pull him. But if I did have him, that's probably the way that I would build him and play with him, because I think that's a really interesting way to play. Um, there isn't anyone else like him right now. I've been trying to get a counterattack build going for Gloria, but this is way better, right? This because I think one of the main limitations of Gloria was that she can only attack back once, and also, I mean, if she takes a lot of damage, she will die. Alexei doesn't have that problem. He can attack back up to 3 times. He can strike back up to 3 times, and he doesn't die. He has unlimited resolve on him. So with that said, let's look at his other skills to talk about it as well, because I think there are other ways to play him as well, and there's so many other things you can do with him. So I think it's good to just make this guide properly and talk about everything that he can do. So let's look at his rank 1 skills. He has one called Fight to the Death. Usually when you're dying, like actually it says the effect right here. When your HP is below 30%, it reduces the damage that you deal by 30% and increases the damage you take by 30%. As I said, this dying is a pretty hefty debuff. So when he is in the dying state, his attack and defense increases by 20%. This is actually, in my opinion, a good alternative to use before you get to this. Like, say you're at level 50 or, below 55, and so you're not able to get your rank 11 skills yet. So because of that, you will probably, I would assume, I would suggest that you get this one as long as you have him at the 3rd star. And the reason it's important that you have him at 3rd star is because without the toughness, this skill doesn't really work. If you have toughness on him, it negates the dying effects, but he still has the dying state. It just negates the effects from it. So whenever he is in the dying state, he will just get an extra 20% attack and defense. So when his Gore Drinker, not his Gore Drinker, when his unlimited resolve is triggered and he has low health, he will actually do increased damage because he has more, 20% more attack. So that's how I would use him. But again, it is important to get him at the 3rd star to use this. Otherwise, it doesn't. Otherwise, like you're almost canceling the effect, right? Like your damage dealt is reduced by 30%, so your attack is increased by 20%. It doesn't really work. So if you don't have him at 3rd star, if you don't plan to get him at 3rd star, I mean, the skill is not going to be as effective in that case. This is just a regular skill. A lot of people have like slam. It knocks targets back by 2. This is good in some maps where you have like ledges and stuff to push enemies off of. In the rank 3 skill, this is a really good skill with a lot of application. You can use this for boss fights, and you can use this for many other places where you're attacked by one or a group of enemies. What it does is it deals piercing damage. Piercing damage means it ignores defenses. He deals piercing damage equal to 40% of his magic attack. So he's not going to be doing a lot of damage with it. It's only 40% in his magic attack, which he doesn't have a lot of, but it still ignores the enemy's defense. So it's okay. But the good thing about this is that it afflicts attack 3 down. Attack 3 down is a debuff that decreases physical and magic attack by 30%. I think there's very, very few sources of attack 3 debuff. I've mostly seen attack 2. So this is definitely a very strong debuff, and it lasts for 2 turns. It's a cooldown of 5, so it is a bit difficult to use in that sense, especially for boss fights if you want it every turn. So if you are using this and you're taking this and you're using it against boss fights, what I would suggest is use this right before the boss does some kind of critical attack. I mean, most bosses have an attack pattern you can map out. You know exactly when they're going to use something. So use this right before the turn when they do their whatever attack you can survive. Another way to play him and use him with this skill is whenever his where is it? Whenever his trait, his unlimited resolve is triggered, after that use this. So basically, I mean, he's still there. He is, he's taking some damage, but he's able to debuff everybody and reduce their attack significantly. So he's still going to be able to, like he can still survive because he will have some HP, and because of Gore Drinker, he'll be able to get some of his health back, especially if he's doing AoE attacks. That's going to amount to a lot of health being captured back. But if he's not able to survive, if he's not able to kill people off, if he's not able to survive, you can bring this to additionally, boost his defenses by lowering everyone else's attack. So if you're having trouble with survival, this is a skill you could bring instead. For the rank 5 reaction, this is something that I would probably use in a boss fight. because whenever you receive an active attack, you put vulnerable 2 on the boss. Vulnerable 2 increases the damage taken by 20%. So this is a powerful skill that you can bring against boss fights. This guy is similar to Magnus, such that he has so many things that are good that, you know, to really get the best out of him, you have to use Castelia to unlock, you know, many other things so that you can build him in different ways and bring him to many different things. The one that I showed you is probably the standard way I would play him. When I first started and I said, okay, these are the 3 skills I would take, the reaction. But if you want to get the most out of him and bring him to every situation and use him to the best possible, then you have to use Castelia to unlock the other skills and, you know, bring him to, you know, use the skills that are situated to the different situations. For rank 7, I talked about Gore Drinker already. It's a very, very powerful skill. I think everyone should bring it if you are using him. I think Gore Drinker and his trait work very well. His trait allows him to survive and not die for 1 turn. His Gore Drinker allows him to get his health back during that time. This is also an interesting skill. It helps him to charge towards enemies. He only has move 3, so this would help him to, you know, rush towards enemies, and so he will stun the enemy that he picks. Like you can only pick 1 target. The target that you pick, he will stun, but everyone else within 2 squares of him, he will deal some damage to. The stunned unit, he deals even more damage, but everyone else, he deals AoE damage and creates an ice field. And then he gets the Warrior of Frost, which reduces his damage taken by 30%, and he's also able to move around while he's on the ice tile. This is another skill that you can bring if you're having trouble with survival, because after, you know, say after his resolve triggers and is gone, and then, you know, you're having trouble to keep him alive for the next turn. This is another skill that you can use to, you know, to increase his defenses. It reduces the damage taken by 30%. And he also stuns a unit as well, so he's taking them out of commission once every 4 turns. So this is, again, an alternative way to play. If you're having trouble keeping him alive, this is a skill that you can bring to basically help him with the survival. For the 9th, for basically his normal attack, which skill to pick? I mean, this is the one that I would pick because it has extra damage. You know, instead of 100%, he does 110% damage. The other skill, this one, what is it called? Ice attack. I don't know. I mean, like, move 1 is interesting, but I mean, he will attack, and then it basically prevents enemies from going towards like anybody behind him, because most enemies will have three movement, right? So to get around him, they need all 3. But if he attacks somebody with this, and they have to be healthy, by the way. If he attacks a healthy enemy with this, they will have 2 movement, so it'll be hard for them to get around and go attack your backline. So it's good for that, but I feel like it's very there's very limited scenarios where this is useful, and you're also only able to do this against healthy targets, right? So I feel like instead this is the better one to go for, and he's a little bit energy intensive, so having 1 extra way to recover some energy, I think is great. So I would suggest this is the basic attack skill that you should go for. And finally, this is the last skill that we haven't talked about, Guard. Most tankers have some kind of skill like this that allows them to take damage for allies. If you're having trouble keeping your team alive, this is a skill that you can bring. You know, because this way he will make sure that he protects them, like within 2 spaces. Even if an enemy targets someone else on your team, he will swap places with them and protect them anyway. It's an okay skill to bring. I mean, most tanks have the skill already somewhere in their kit. If you're having trouble to figure out the best positioning to only have him taking damage, you know, making him run up and his unlimited resolve triggers, and then his crazy strike backs, triggers, and all those things. If you're having trouble to get all of that to work with your positioning, you can use the skill instead to be able to make sure that your team is protected and he's the one getting hit. So this is you can function without it, but if you're not using it, it is a lot harder because you have to pay attention to positioning even more. But maybe that's good. Like maybe some people prefer that for strategy. So, but it is an option. I'm thankful that this option is there because for Magnus it's not there, and there are times when I would like Magnus to have a skill like this. But anyway, I mean each character is different. Overall, I think Alexei is a very good and strong character. I think that I think if you pulled him and you tried him out and you're playing with him, I don't think you'd be disappointed. He's does so many things well, and all of his, so many of his skills have applications. So there are very few skills. I think there's only like one that I really wouldn't. No, actually, I mean, like even this one, I realized I missed this one, Burning Bridges. Um, so he gets offensive stance, which boosts his physical attack by 40% and increases the damage taken by 8. I mean, if he has unlimited resolve and he's using that, it doesn't really matter how much damage he takes, right? So yeah, I mean, you can. There's so many different ways to build him. I feel like he's like Gloria, like and Magnus. Like these are all characters where all the skills are very powerful. So yeah, I hope you have fun experimenting with him. I mean, unfortunately, it is a little bit hard to experiment when you are down on Castelia, but yeah, let me know what you guys think. Show me how you guys are playing with him, and if there's anything I missed about him, let me know as well. So, for some equipment, equipment recommendations. I mean, this is always hard because it really depends what people have. I think the tarot recommendation is what like the best way to talk about it. Um, what would I go? I would probably go with the Tarot of the Magician because the Tarot of the Magician, especially with the extra effect, uh, at the base level he gets 16% increased damage, and then for every any skill that he uses that he targets more than one unit, he gets plus 8% damage up to 24. So the way that I talked about him earlier, right, with using this skill and bunching up enemies and stuff like that, um, I think that's probably the one that I would go for that provides him the most benefit. If you're having trouble keeping him alive, then I would go with the Hermit Tarot because that reduces the damage that he takes by an additional 20%. Yeah, with the weapon, I mean, it's really depending on circumstance. There is one weapon that increases his defense and then adds some of his defense to his attack. That's the one that I'm using. I don't recall the name off the top of my head, but there's another one that also removes buffs from enemies every time you attack them. Um, Depending on the circumstance, they can all be good. Um, for the trinket, I don't really know what the best trinket for him would be. Most of the time, I mean, I just use whatever I have. I don't have the best trinkets myself, so I'm just using whatever I have at level 40 or sometimes level 50. Um, I honestly, I would look for someone else to recommend what to use for equipment because I'm not familiar too well with the best stuff because myself I'm just experimenting around to see what's good and what's not. Um, so yeah, so that's my guide on Alexei. I hope you enjoyed the guide. If you have any questions or comments, leave them down below, and I will see you guys next time. Take care.